Hey, Jess,
Matt,
want to record a podcast?
let's record a podcast, buddy.
Sweet. It's been a while.
No kidding, man. How are you?
Not too bad. It's been a busy weekend.
How's
Trying to,
my audio right now?
I can hear you loud and clear.
Perfect. I can hear you perfect.
Excellent, my man. So yeah, what's the lay of the land? How you doing over there?
Dude, I'm actually enjoying this whole thing. Believe it or not, I'm staying so far above water right now. It's not even funny.
Yeah.
Like I feel like I needed this kind of like it's almost like a reset from
I'd say
people.
it's definitely a reset in a lot of ways, man. If you really want to humble a globalized civilization, this is probably one of nature's way of doing it.
Absolutely. I've definitely been thinking about the whole biological piece to it, and like the trying to figure out what how to actually feel on a global scale, because I know that this does lead to a lot of suffering, but at the same time, it's I feel like it's morbid to say, but it's overdue, if that makes sense, in the most kindest way. Like this kind of thing is overdue to kind of remind us um when Mother Nature's like, I think we got a little bit too cocky over the last couple of years.
A bit of a speed check, for us in our progress. Okay, I'm gonna
Absolutely.
ask you, this is actually perfect. So, have you heard of A Short History of Progress by Ronald Wright?
I don't think I have, no.
He is an author. I want to say Canadian. I actually have the book with me right here. I'm pretty sure. So he was born in England to a Canadian father and an English mother, and now lives in BC. But he's got some pretty amazing published works out there. One being Stolen Continents, and he kind of looks at the other side of history and what that kind of first contact really was, going through kind of like the Spanish and South America and all that sort of stuff. But this one, I read this a long time ago, and I'll put it up right here. It's called A Short History of Progress. And it's very, very small book, very short. And his whole thing is talking about what he calls progress traps. And so a progress trap, if you're unfamiliar with that, is essentially when we build things or create things, being human species, that we're essentially the brain, right? Like, and everything that we're doing right now is this big kind of like social experiment, and everything we've ever done has been this kind of construct by human. So he talks of progress traps. So like when he looks at hunting, for example, primitive man kind of started off as a hunter, and then they started looking at more efficient ways of doing things. So they created knives, they created spears, they created bows and arrows, and all these different things. So that's good progress. It kind of creates efficiency in the function that is meant to serve. So it's a tool for hunting. But then you get to a point where they start creating like mammoth runs, and they decimate an entire species. So that's a progress trap, is when the experiment and the progress itself no longer serves as a promising function and actually decimates something on the end. It becomes destructive. So I just started this. I haven't read this in a long time. I think it came out maybe 10 years ago, but it's still it couldn't be more relevant to what we're doing right now. And it just talks about how we repeat ourselves in history, and how we we repeat ourselves in a lot of different progress and experiments and trials and successes and all these different things. And so I actually stopped reading in chapter 2 right before this, because he says this. So our specialization as a human is the brain. The flexibility of the brain's interactions with nature through culture has been the key to our success. Cultures can adapt far more quickly than genes to new threats and needs. And then he goes on to talk a bit about where we're at now with what he calls the great experiment, which is global civilization. So he's saying we have reached a stage where we must bring the experiment under rational control and guard against present and potential dangers. It's entirely up to us. If we fail, if we blow up or degrade the biosphere so it can no longer sustain us, nature will merely shrug and conclude that letting apes run the laboratory was fun for a while, but in the end, a bad idea.
Yeah, and something else will happen, man.
All right. So, like, if there has ever been a humbling quote, that is the one for me right now. It kind of
Yep.
puts things into perspective. Like, we were never meant to be giants on this earth, but our footprint is ridiculous in every sense of the word, right? Like, it's a remarkable time to be alive, but it's also, have we gone too far? Like, all this globalization, and it's I don't know what the answer is. I'm sure there's balance somewhere, but I haven't found it yet.
Yeah, I know, and it's funny how nature has a funny way of reminding you where the equilibrium line is, and we've shot way past that. and this is just a little tug
Mhm.
back down to normal.
Yeah.
We're not anywhere near the equilibrium line. We're still going up, but it's just that little dip to remind us, hey, get back here. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
For sure. I found an interesting part in that too was you saying cultures can adapt far more quickly than genes to new threats and needs. So when you look at that, even though this was written 10, 15 years ago, what is the culture now? And do we have a culture? And I'm not talking just about indigenous culture. I just mean as like a globalized culture. Do we have the culture to actually protect ourselves against this current threat? Because when I go online, and I don't have Facebook or anything like that, but lately I've been going on just as like a public viewer. So I don't know if I can see everything, but I see like public comments and stuff like that. And it makes me wonder, do we have a supportive enough culture for us to get past this? All I see, especially with Manitoulin and stuff, is a lot of like divide and anger and entitlement and, you know, a lot of like misinformation and misconstruals and all these types of things. Like, so do we have the culture that lets us take on the responsibilities that we need to do to protect ourselves, our families, and not just that, but our communities and ultimately our nation and our world? Like, it's, I don't know, it seems very very heated and hostile environments, but that's what the internet is too, right? It's a congregation of trolls for the most part.
And I think it's important to ask who's us. Like when you say our culture, who's us?
Yeah.
Right? Is it us as Islanders? Is it us as First Nations? Is it us as Canadians? Like where do you want to view that perspective from?
Yeah.
That's important too.
And there's so many layers to that now too, right? We're in a globalized world where you are one click away. Like, look at this, I just sent you a link, and next thing I know, I'm talking to my cousin Chiging. We could easily do the same thing to someone in Australia, Italy, Germany, whatever it is. Granted, I don't speak German, so that'd be kind of useless. Hopefully they speak English.
Do you speak Chigingese?
Chigingese. Yeah, but it's no, it's I don't know. And there's so many different pieces of this too. Like, you're right, like what is us? And I think too, one of those teachings that I got at the Federation, um about all my relations, right? So it's about yourself, it's about your family, it's about your community and your nation. But in this day and age, the nation is can like the next step to that is the world. And we're all connected, right?
Like
But
we can't even get along as a functioning First Nation when things are going well. That's the problem.
yeah.
So when you throw in a global pandemic and a crisis where the consequences couldn't be higher, you're actually seeing the real fabric of what the reserve is compiled of, if that makes sense. Like not only from a legislation perspective, but just in terms of communication on a day-to-day level. You're seeing the real sides of people, I think. Because I think fear has a great power to kind of strip away the logical thinking if you let it,
Yeah.
and it exposes that emotional response, and that I think that emotional response um, is so obvious in today's climate.
Hmm.
You know, you can see people's traumas coming up that might not even have recognized it in the past, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And I
I've
mean,
been looking into psychology a lot, and just the way that emotions have the ability to manifest themselves unconsciously. You
mhm.
can, and the way fear kind of exploits that. It's an incredible thing to see.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, when you think of it, when you strip it down to that kind of reptilian brain and the sympathetic nervous system, like your response to any sort of threatening stimuli, it typically triggers one thing of the three: fight, flight, or freeze, right?
Hmm.
At this point, we're in lockdown. There's nowhere you can really flee. Freeze doesn't seem like an option because sometimes our anxiety wants us to have some sort of element of control over a situation. So what's left? You see a lot of fighting, right? And you see that
Exactly.
tension and those kind of conflicts coming on the what is the only global platform right now, right? Like the Facebooks, the Twitters, the Instagrams, whatever it is, right? And I'm not sure how hostile it is outside of like the island sort of platform and channel, but at least what I'm seeing here is it's pretty upsetting. to think that, you know, we can't rally around each other and things are taking such a divide. But I think we also need to look at, why are we responding? Like you said, what is stimulating these emotions and these responses? And a lot of it is a lack of control with the current social climate and the current biological climate, and not knowing what's going to happen, right? There's no crystal ball to look into the future to see what's happening next. And on the best of days without this type of thing, it's hard to know what's going to happen tomorrow. But now there's even more uncertainty than ever, and there's a genuine threat and a risk to not only ourselves but our families, our loved ones, our elders, our communities, our leaders, all this stuff, right? So it's natural that there's going to be this sort of sympathetic nervous system response where you know, people are fighting, and that makes it almost kind of scarier too, because I think a lot of people maybe aren't doing the self-reflection that needs to be done to really kind of cope through something like this. And some people are probably doing amazing things too, right? But you know, I can only really speak for myself. I guess I haven't really left my property for about 3 weeks now, other
I
than
know,
the odd
man.
dump run.
It's been about me and Nicole were just counting. I think we're going on to our 6th week, and uh, going off what you were saying, it's like a big deadly game of telephone everybody's playing
Yeah.
at the same time, right? We're thinking about like, where are we getting our information from right now? Is it from what news source? Even the news source is vary depending on where you're getting your information from. Um, from word of mouth, that can be dangerous as ever, right? I mean, I've talked to so many different people that have positive views of this, have negative views, and it's like, where do you pick your source of information from? It's this bubble you choose to live in.
Yeah. Well, and again, it comes down to like, what kind of cultural atmosphere do we inhabit, right? Like, are we going to look, like you said, are we just going to focus on the culture that our family tries to do within the household for how to get by it? Or, and I think in this day and age, it's not too far fetched to think that we can rely on our global network and connections to find that support, and to try and get through this in some sort of lens of optimism or positivity. But I don't think that's our natural or our default mechanism as humans either. You know, there's kind of two sides to that coin.
Yeah, I'm split. I've been thinking about, the globalization trend that we're in right now, and I almost feel I'm in the opposite bandwagon, where I'm more of a devolution person, in terms of keep it in a small community,
Mm,
in the sense of, I think, give more control to small communities, if that makes sense, and have the global picture more of a humanitarian project,
mm,
rather than rather than an overbodying power. It just gets slippery when you try to consider managing China, US, and Canada collectively, when what are the real similarities? Well,
yeah. Well, I don't think we're ready to manage 7 billion people or even really be a part of that network.
but that's where we're going, and that's where, I don't know what side of the fence I'm on yet. I find myself dipping my toes in support of globalization, just for the benefits of the interconnected networking, but I also find the positives in small community and establishing
Mhm.
trust in that regard. And I don't know necessarily if you need to have one without the other, or if they can coexist. Um, I
Well,
don't know.
I don't think we're ready for a network of 7 billion people. I think you kind of hit the nail on the head in terms of working and operating within our communities is something that's more realistic and achievable, and where you can see change and find comfort. But I think where the benefits of globalization is we can look at things such as Prime Minister in New Zealand, and look at how they're kind of leading the charge and role modeling what leadership looks like, and taking the positives from what other people are doing. So we don't necessarily need to interact with that network, but we can draw from it. You know, I think we now have the opportunity to pull from all that amazing work that's happening across the world, and emulate it or replicate it or modify it to fit our own communities and our own stories and our own narratives. the other side of that is when you open up a channel where you can pull from that, you're going to pull in a lot of other negativity or kind of other side of the stories from worldwide as well, right? So it comes as a blessing where we can draw that inspiration, but we also have to have a pretty strong filter, or almost I guess that's it. We have to have a good filter to be able to filter out the BS.
So on that note, I was thinking about Facebook groups or more along the lines of like these online public platforms where you have the ability to voice your opinion on any of these things. And I'll use Chigingers for example. It's a private group on Facebook that apparently only people from Chiging or have ties to Chiging are able to access. But there's been a lot of negative comments on there lately. I don't know if you've been able to see, but I'm just wondering what your opinion is on having these public platforms available, and whether you think it's necessary to have a moderator involved, and what kind of power does that give the moderator in a time like this?
It's interesting because a moderator in any given scenario is so arbitrary in the Facebook platform, right? Anyone can start a group, and if you have a trending or viral group or something that flocks everyone to that group, you weren't elected leader, you weren't elected moderator. I don't know if you have a background to be an orator or any sort of judge or juror in anything that should be put there. You'd like to think that the average person would have enough sense to kind of moderate it, but I mean, it's too arbitrary. You don't know. It's just luck of the draw in terms of opening up a group and then assuming that role of moderator. Personally, and this was kind of part of the reason that I got off Facebook, is I don't think we've earned the right to have that global public platform, because we've abused it far too many times. You see a lot of thought strict from emotion, or a lot of comments that don't have any sort of balance or genuine, at least in my observation, thought into it. So again, just going back to like the Chaging blockade, right? That's going on right now, and reading some of the comments on those threads, it is just a battlefield, and none of it is supportive. Not anyone is, well, there are a few people in favor, and there's lots of people against, all that sort of stuff, right? And it's a huge undertaking for Chaging as well. And I get that Chaging is trying to protect their community, and that's what people should be seeing is, hey, this is a community that's trying to do what it can to protect a vulnerable population or demographic within their population. Whether it's being done in the right way or wrong way, I'm not the person to say thumbs up or thumbs down. I just have an opinion on it, I guess. But reading the comments, it was like, it's not all relevant to the thread. I don't even know how anyone could undertake something like that, especially when you start arguing for freedom of speech and their right to kind of have an opinion. Everyone has their right to their wrong opinion, I guess, but at the end of the day, I don't want to necessarily be exposed to all of that. Well,
So
actually, while we have this, and one of the things that's been driving me crazy, and maybe I'm miseducated in all this, but how many times has someone called Chaging a reservation? We don't have reservations in Canada, do we? Isn't a reservation an American sort of terminology that represents like a ceded territory? And then we have reserves up here. Like, I think that's a pretty significant semantic piece when you're looking at these things as well. If you're going to bring in racial tone to it, I mean, at least have the right kind of the right vocabulary to have those conversations.
well, that's funny. What is the difference between reserve and reservation?
I'm pretty sure I've only seen reservation as an American terminology, and I'm pretty sure it just talks about a territory. I mean, it probably could be, for all contents of purpose, or for all intents and purpose, it could be probably fairly synonymous, but I can't name one reservation in Canada. I can name a bunch of First Nation reserves, but I've never seen the word reservation in Canada to my knowledge. Granted, I'm 30 years young, so I don't know. I haven't seen it all, but yeah. Can you name a reservation in Canada?
Bossing seems like it would be a reservation.
That's because they're close to the States. Let's Google it. When in doubt. So
That's
what?
funny. I've never heard of that perspective of the difference between reserve and reservation. I always felt the two were the same thing.
So, okay, so again, I don't know how, this is just the first one on Indigenous Awareness Canada. What is the difference between a reserve and reservation? Reserves are only in Canada and reservations are only in the United States. Reserves
Huh.
and reservations are quite different. In Canada, there can be dozens of reserves within treaty boundaries, while in the United States, reservations generally cover the entire treaty area.
I'll tally that one up for you. Holy
There,
smokes,
so there you
Mister
have it.
Ex-counselor didn't catch that one.
That's been one of my pet peeves for a while, and I never really put it out there or asked anyone. And that was just based on my own experience. But that's something when I see someone saying, "Well, when they're blocking off the reservation," I kind of just automatically dismiss the content of the comment because I'm
Let's
like, you know, it's,
let's back up for a second. For people that have been living under a rock, what's going on in Chiging right now is that there is a giant campaign, and it's actually an active project going on right now that are setting up. There's roadblocks set up on every entrance, every highway entrance into the reserve, on the west, south, and the eastern side. And apparently, the MO is to only allow essential services, um, the ability to kind of go in and out, and then any non-essential travel is expected to not engage in Chiging, like not get through Chiging. Rather, well, I guess everybody's supposed to be staying at home if they're not in an essential service or need to be doing essential work. But we just seem to be in a situation where information isn't agreed upon. It was a very rushed, or at least it seemed like a very rushed operation, where I believe it was Friday afternoon, we or Friday morning, we found out that there was going to be these roadblocks set up, and us as band members not participating in essential travel would not be able to go to and from, just like non-band members will not be able to come in Chiging or leave Chiging as well. You shouldn't actually even be in Chiging if you're not an essential band member at this point, I don't think. um, that's not my opinion, that's just what the legislation says.
mhm.
And yeah, there just seems to be a lot of grief going on right now, because not only do we have less than 24 hours to prepare for this new initiative, but it seemed like it was introduced with um, mixed emotions, not only from the community, but from the council chambers as well.
Hmm.
I don't think it was a very unanimous decision. It seemed like it was cut right down the middle. And what we're seeing now is a lot of back and forth on Facebook from First Nations people, especially from Chiging, and cottagers and non-First Nations in these public forums that might not be the most progressive conversation, and it seems to only be making the divide a little bit more established,
Mhm.
from what I've seen. Now, there has been some very good conversation, some civil conversation, but that's not the majority, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty fair summation of what's going on. I find it interesting too because in a lot of those comments, um, and obviously this is how we reflect and respond to things, but a lot of it in response just seems like, "What about me?" and then present a hypothetical situation that would affect them. Like I said, there's more people worried about themselves and their whatever their agenda item might be, than looking at the greater picture of why they're doing it. Again, I don't know. I don't have any other solution as to why it happened, and I get why it would have to be quick too, because at the same time, if you give people a week's notice before you do something like this, what does that week look like, and what does that influx and that kind of chaos over that window look like too, right? So you got to kind of control that natural tendency to react within a window as well. Like, that's a tough call to make for a chief and council, and I don't know if
Mhm.
it's right or wrong, or maybe it's not a matter of right or wrong, but just something that they're doing to establish boundary for protection, right?
Yeah.
I don't know. It's tough, and it's easy for me to kind of just look at it and not have a horse in the race because, like I said, I'm here waiting for baby number 3 at home, which is going to be a home delivery if everything goes well. So I don't have a need right now to be going down the road and kind of past that checkpoint or to that end of the island. And I'm sure everyone's need to cross is equally important to them, whether it's checking a property for damage, whether it's escaping the city to isolate and their own protection, or to care for a loved one, or parents or grandparents, anything like that. Like, that's a tough call to make, and I do have to commend Chiging for taking that step to do something, because a lot of times we're just kind of on standby or doing that kind of observe and report, right? I don't know.
Yeah.
You're from Chigang. What's your take on all this? Like, that's a big move.
Well, you know what? I think the initial project idea was to have the bridge turned, or at least some sort of checkpoint at the bridge, just a single in and out, passageway.
Mhm.
Um, and I don't think that's just from reserves. I think there was a few municipalities that were on board with that, but there seemed to be a few players that didn't support that initiative.
Mhm.
And I understand both sides of the coin. Which side is right, I don't know, because it is like, how do you decide who's considered essential and who isn't considered essential? I think that's where the butting of heads would come in play the most if
Mhm.
that was to be set up. How is Nimi going to agree with Shishiguaning, and how are the Meldrum Bay going to agree with Chiging on who's allowed to come in and who isn't,
Yeah.
and who can make the exceptions, right? That's where you kind of get into the difficulties of that expanding progress on a larger scale. From the Chiging perspective, looking in, you definitely feel the distrust, or at least the heightened awareness, or um, there's a lot of stress.
Mhm.
Um, no matter who you talk to right now, um, they've got an opinion on it, which way or the other. There's a lot of people that are totally for it and support every aspect of shutting down the reserve and making people go around. And I don't necessarily have an opinion on it myself, other than I know you can't please everybody, and what do you do in this situation? Sure, the cottagers can't necessarily come through; they've got to go around a little bit.
Mhm.
Um, and it is an inconvenience. You got to go around. I think the detour is going to be about 30 to 45 minutes of extra driving time,
Yeah, that's a lot of road for sure.
considering, yeah, getting through. Um, but in the grand scheme, like, your intentions are good. Like, I believe our council's intentions are genuinely, we want to protect our people, and more especially the elders in our community. And I know that there's been a lot of fear from the elders in the last couple of weeks. It's been 5 or 6 weeks now. We've been on some sort of Chiging uh, heightened awareness here. And I think this initiative kind of keeps these elders a little bit at ease, if that makes sense. That it's giving them a little bit of assurance that their community is supporting their vulnerable needs, and it gives them a little bit of a stronger feeling that they're able to go outside and or go to their local grocery store and feel a little bit safer. Now it's more of an optical thing, in my opinion, and it, it eventually will lead to a practical result of less risk coming into the community.
Yeah,
But
risk
what are
mitigation.
you sacrificing for that? Are you sacrificing um, people's freedoms to come and go? It could be the case. You're telling somebody, you're not allowed to go if I don't think your reason is sufficient by my standard, because there is a little bit of a clause saying, people can get permission slips to go through, and that kind of brings us, in my opinion, back to the Indian agent days when we did need a little bit of a permission slip to get off the reserve,
Hmm.
to do whatever business we needed to do. So I was thinking about that,
Just never
and
thought of it.
how slippery that slope can be.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really fascinating reflection. I wouldn't have even pieced that kind of Indian agent permission slip piece, and especially because when you have your chief and counsel leading it, it's a different optic. But even the context and the content of the approach of it does have that kind of feel, right? Where you're stuck to a territory. That yeah, I didn't even think about that at all, Jess. That's just kind of making my head spin a little bit,
Well,
right?
there's a lot of scars there too, right? A lot of these people, they lived through the time where you couldn't congregate in a group of 5 or more Indians, and it was deemed an illegal protest. You know what I mean? That was only 40, 50 years ago that you couldn't congregate in large groups of First Nations people
Mm-hmm.
because it was a terrorist threat.
Mm-hmm.
And so those people are still alive today, and they're being told you're not able to go out, you're not allowed to be in these social groups of more than 3 or 4 people, and you have to stay away. That could probably open up some wounds for people that haven't processed that trauma,
Yeah, even if the contemporary context is different, that's still a trigger, right? If someone's had that lived experience.
because it's the government again saying you can't be within this much many feet, and then people looking out with a different opinion will satanize you, or at least make you look so bad for disagreeing with their
Mhm.
views, right?
Yeah. No, it's yeah, I never really thought of that. I think the important part right now, the biggest thing, is unity. And regardless of who you voted for, whether you're, a Ford guy, a Trudeau guy, whatever it is, I think the important thing is there's not going to be any change of leadership at this point in time. So what we need to do is we need to rally behind our leaders and all get on the same page for whatever the game plan is. If if the end goal is safety and wellness and good living and whatever it takes to get back to some semblance of normalcy, and by dividing and I watched a couple of the Ford updates. I'm not watching the updates as much anymore because I'm trying to budget my exposure to a lot of this kind of COVID news. But I would see some things and people would be like, oh, well, now you're saying it's a state of emergency, but you didn't say that 2 weeks ago. What's giving? Like, what gives? I'm like, well, now's not the time. That doesn't matter. He's saying it's a state of emergency now, so let's rally behind him. Whether you agree with his politics or not, it's going to take unity as a community, as a province, and as a nation to ultimately get past this, right? And part of that, we're going to have some compassion and benevolence in everything that we're doing. But I don't know if that's wishful thinking. But in my mind, that's what's going to curb this, right? And it's going to take a while. And especially when you look at the island too, and you look at some of our vulnerable populations, whether you're looking at any health risks, be it diabetes, heart issues, you know, addictions, elderly populations, anything where we have compromised immune systems and stuff like that. Like if the island gets hit, it's going to get hit hard. And this is our one thing that we have to do right now is protect our families and our island. And that's what we can do for our part. Right. And that includes not going to Sudbury and not going to Espanola if we don't have to, right? That kind of stuff. It's a game of risk mitigation, in my opinion. And Heather and I have had this conversation quite a bit because we're looking at a lot of different scenarios. We're 3 weeks away from baby's due date, and realistically that could mean that we have to go to Sudbury, to go to the hospital, right? Which then creates a whole other kind of scenarios of exposure as well. But not only that, we have family who's essential service workers as well that would need to come and watch our girls as well. So then we're opening doors all over the place, right? In terms of where these potential exposures could be. Where right now we have full control of the situation, but so easily it can open up into something else. Like even us coming back, we're like, if we come back from the hospital, as much as we appreciate the help and support of whoever's watching the kids, like our two now, we don't want to put them at risk coming back as well either, right? So that's a consideration that we're making as well. It's not just about who's going to watch our kids and help us, but how do we have a conscious effort to mitigate risks for who we have contact with as well.
I've been thinking about you guys too, especially with having two girls. One of the most I've been thinking about being grateful and trying to stay gratuitous over this period. And one of the things that I keep reoccurring on is how thankful I am for not having knocked somebody up when I was in high school or college and having to live with a toddler right now. I don't know how you do it with two of them, and let alone having another one on the way. So maybe you can like give me some like perspective on how you're handling everything, and how your girls are handling everything, because it is kind of difficult to be able to have to explain what's going on, why you're not able to go to school, but also you can't leave the house.
Yeah.
How are you dealing with that?
Well, yeah, Jess, definitely don't have a pandemic baby right now. That's my advice to you. You've met my girls. We're lucky. Those kids are so happy-go-lucky. Like, they just make the most out of any given moment, and they've really been a blessing in terms of our ability to cope as well, because they're so jovial and playful, and they have their moments. Like, it's a roller coaster. It's funny too, because we've been doing a lot of reflecting as well. And when they were young, like they're only a year and a half apart, that was a lot of work when you had a newborn and a year and a half year old, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it was a lot of work for a long time. um, Probably more so for Heather than me, because she has to look after me as well and all that. But now when they're at 4 and 5.5, like they're best buds. They just play all day, and we've explained to them kind of it at terms of what's going on. Like, they know that there's a virus, they know to wash their hands, they know that they have to give what their Nucky and Papa call virtual hugs from a distance, like through the window or across the yard type thing. And it's you can see their natural inclination to want to go and be social and be kind of like hands-on with their grandparents. So there's always that reminder. But in terms of how our kids are coping with it, they're doing amazing. Like, they're really just absolutely slaying it. They're also enjoy like a little bit of the school activity. Sometimes it's hard to kind of rally the troops and get everything going. Heather is again the workhorse in all of this, like kind of balancing everything with the kids, the meals, that sort of stuff. Because I still have my duties. I'm still working full time with Gweck, and that's it's a pretty demanding job, if you remember. So there's always something going on that requires my attention. But for the most part, I've had lots of support at home. Yeah, buddy. I've had lots of support at home. I've had lots of support from work, to kind of not necessarily need to be dialed in 8:30 to 4:30, but to kind of flex as needed. And a lot of it is just looking at the internal locus of control of things that I can control, and not worrying too much about that external locus of control, like things that I have absolutely no say or control over. So things like the news, things that are happening in Australia or Toronto, all that sort of stuff. I'm trying to really just keep my lens and my kind of social cognition focused on the immediate and the things that I can actually balance. But yeah, certainly there's been a lot of kind of unprecedented anxiety for me. Like, I have to kind of speed check myself once in a while. And now with this baby coming, like, I mean, we had this birth plan pretty much planned out. And every day that we get closer to the due date, something changes that makes that birth plan shift again, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I guess maintaining flexibility and acceptance. If you remember acceptance and commitment therapy, it's a
Yep.
lot of that, right? And it's being able to compartmentalize and operate in a solution focused way. As kind of textbook and cliche as that sounds, like, it's working.
Good. So you said you're gonna have a home birth?
Yeah, not a lot of other options right now.
I
So
guess so.
we have a midwife, and we have a baby calendar as well. So the baby's projected to be here May 15th, but there's a lot of people putting $20 on other dates, including you. I think you just took an
Oh,
entire week
dude,
there.
I took half my paycheck in that. I didn't realize I wasn't. Didn't realize there was two whole
Two calendars.
two separate calendars I could have bet on.
Well, we were gonna take the money that was given to baby and just put it back into the family for some gambling intervention programs. Those calendars went up quick. But yeah, so we're basically just on standby. We've been cleaning the house regularly, trying to keep everything, like, we have a process for everything, like even getting groceries. I don't know how we'd be able to do this without my parents. My mom or dad go out and they do the groceries for us. They drop them off at the door. This is where that kind of tech boom comes in handy, because we can just e-transfer them based on whatever receipts in the bill or in the bag, right? So those tools definitely help. But yeah, no, it's interesting. We're not really sure what's going to happen. And if you know us, which you do, obviously, we can't just have a normal birth. Like, our first one was the wrong anatomy scan. We thought we were having a boy. We had a girl. Second one was born in the van on the way to the hospital. And third one, the pandemic baby. So needless to say, I'll be getting snipped after this, because I don't want to cause the apocalypse with number 4.
No kidding, man. Look at you have a story for each of one of those births. All 3 of those girls.
Yeah,
Good
man.
Lord.
So, I mean, this is Raise the Bar. This is supposed to be a wellness podcast. What are you going to do to maintain wellness through all of this?
Oh man, I started running again.
Nice.
I started running as soon as the weather got nice. Even when it was windy the last couple of days, holy smokes. I'm starting to feel, I don't want to say I'm feeling my age, because I'm only, I'm younger than you, but I feel what those years of lack of exercise have been doing to me. I think that the 2 years at least the year we've taken off on this thing, um, I honestly really didn't do much. I didn't do much exercise. I probably when we weighed ourselves in, I think it was 177 when we first did our first season of this thing.
Mhm.
Um, and I think I've got to be north of 250 right now.
Really?
About 250, yeah.
Huh. I wouldn't.
Um, I think I've definitely well, I might be lower than that. I feel like I've lost weight over this week of running. I went 50K this week.
Holy.
Yeah, I've got I'm tracking it.
So how
Um
much of that do you think is dietary, or do you think it's sedentary as well?
in terms of the weight fluctuation,
Yeah.
totally dietary for me. I'm somebody who can really get stuck in eating habits,
Mhm.
poor eating habits. I think I've been on a poor eating habit stumble since September when moose hunting started, and I haven't rebounded until this COVID-19 crisis hit, and I'm taking it as an opportunity to go the other way.
Mhm.
I've always had an excuse for things, and um, I think moving forward, we were talking last night. What do you think our goals and challenges are going to be? Mine's definitely to get in more of a routine we had before. Definitely not as strict or diligent as it was before, but something that's more achievable. And I think a lot of that, well, for me, I know it's 90% mental and 10% physical. I'm never really um, finding myself too sore or like not wanting to eat a healthy meal. It's just the mental preparation leading up to it. And I don't know if you feel the same way in those instances. I feel like I'm probably not making any groundbreaking discoveries by saying that, but I want to maintain what I've got going the last couple of weeks, and I was really happy that you said you wanted to start doing some more accountability meetings like this
Yeah, for sure.
moving forward. How have you been? I mean, you look like you haven't gained a pound since then.
You know what? I think I came in at about 185 when we finished our challenge, and I'm probably somewhere in the like just under 200 range. I've been pretty consistent for pretty much the last 5-6 years. I've never really gone over 205, and I haven't really gone under 190. I think most of it was water weight from our challenge that was gone. And yeah, I agree with you. That was a little hardcore. I wouldn't do something in this like particular climate to do anything too strenuous in terms of what we can do on our day to day. I've been doing pretty good. A lot of dietary changes. So I haven't had a piece of red meat or poultry since
Mhm.
December 31st.
Yeah, Mr. Vegan.
Yeah, well, not necessarily vegan. I still kind of dabble in the dairy industry there. A little bit of cheese here and there, but
Cheese.
yeah, I love cheese. We've gone over this. But yeah, like even now when we do our pizzas, I'm not doing like meat lover pizza. I'm like seasoning some tomatoes, throwing on mushrooms and peppers, some hot sauce, chili flakes, Italian seasoning, and I don't really miss it, to be honest. I think I'm still pretty good with fish right now, and that's what's kind of keeping this sustainable for the most part. Also, the fact that Heather doesn't cook meat and I don't cook very often has really encouraged this way of life. But yeah, so I think that's kind of been a big thing for me. Um, Really just trying to enjoy the time with the kids. But even over the last couple of days, Heather and I have been talking about how independent they're becoming. Like they're just like, Dad, can you turn on some music downstairs for us? And they go down in the basement and they play and they just have a time and they get creative and they have fun, right? So we're trying to still chasing them around. I think probably pushes some sort of caloric deficit depending on what your intake is. But yeah, no, I'm just for maintaining my wellness. I'm just trying to keep balance and honestly not stress or track too much. I find this isn't the time to get into that, and anything that I do in the next couple weeks is going to be completely uprooted and kind of thrown into the grinder once number three's here, and I expect at least 6 months of sleepless nights, and yeah, just pure exhaustion.
Yep. Absolutely.
But yeah, I have been. I actually the past couple weeks I've been really trying to focus on intermittent fasting. So I'm
Oh
not
yeah.
doing like a crazy like 20-hour fast or anything, but just essentially cutting out nighttime snacking. So I just we finished dinner around 6:30. I might kind of nibble on whatever else is around the house, but I don't really eat after 7 anymore. I try to have like a black tea decaffeinated sometime in the night, and just doing some of those kind of more um, things that'll do my body good in terms of my mental wellness as well, because I think there's a direct correlation between that physical and mental piece and emotional piece as well, right?
What uh what guilty pleasure have you realized since this pandemic's been declared? It
Ooh,
doesn't have to be food
guilty pleasure.
that
um,
you realized.
I realize I am one of the biggest procrastinators in the world. When we bought this house 3 years ago, I took a week off work and you and I threw down some laminate floors. And there was a million other projects after that. I have done more work in the past 2 weekends than I have in the last 2 years being in this house. So I think a guilty pleasure is procrastination and whatever form that takes. Typically, it's finding this thing right here and just running songs and scales and modes and whatever I can. I pick up my guitar and I shy away from any responsibility, and it brings me so much like intrinsic happiness and joy to just play music all the time. And Heather and I were talking about that too. I was like, going into this, even if I was alone and didn't have my family is my number one source of like pride and joy and everything. But if none of that existed and I was by myself, if I had a guitar, I would be fine. That's what I've realized.
That's beautiful.
Yeah. What about you?
Mine's not as deep as yours was by any means, but I mean, I've definitely discovered my guilty pleasure throughout this whole thing is I love professional wrestling. Dude, I cannot get enough of this behind the mat and the behind the scenes dark side of the ring on Crave. Have you heard of it?
Is Behind the Mat the original Mick Foley one from like the 90s?
Yeah, from the 90s.
Yeah, that's old school. I
I
remember watching that back in the day.
crushed that. And there's a documentary on Crave called Dark Side of the Ring. It's very modern. They just released season 2 like last week.
Oh,
And
nice.
it covers like the Chris Benoit stories and like the Jimmy Snuka, like crazy scandals going on behind the scenes. And I just can't get enough of like the behind the curtain piece of that product.
Yeah.
Knowing like I'm not watching wrestling because I'm cheering for somebody to win, knowing that it could be a toss up, right? I know it's a scripted event, but it's just the optics of going in an agreed upon choreography of what's going to happen, and
Mhm.
then selling that product even though the audience knows that that's what you're selling. It's it's so crazy to wrap my mind around how it's still alive, 40 years later. I think we're like WrestleMania 37 or something, right? It, I've just been binging.
Man, that must be a Bowden thing because I remember Tank and I back in the day were nonstop wrestling all the time. Like we had the little 8-inch action figures with the jumbotrons that played their theme music on them. Like we watched every WrestleMania. That was the day when that was back in the day with like DX. I don't know if you remember Generation
Yeah, what a art
X. Yeah,
form.
that was a different time. I haven't watched it in years. And actually one of the things that took me away from watching it was my dad took me to, I think it was a Raw filming or live event,
Oh,
whatever.
really?
Well, yeah, way back in the day, like that would have been, oh man, yeah, like maybe late '90s. So yeah, you would have been just like 5 years old when this happened. But anyways, yeah, and I remember going to it and watching it without all the production value really took away from the stimulus and the distraction of how fake it was, and
Mhm.
watching it live really turned it off for me. I'm some people like the stunts are still amazing, the athleticism is still amazing, but it just something in that filming changed for me, and then I wasn't able to really go back after that.
Okay.
But those guys are hardcore athletes. Those women are hardcore athletes, and the commitment and the dedication, and for our entertainment, it's pretty surreal.
The commitment you need to have to not only cut a promo, but to continue a storyline over so many weeks at a time and keep people engaged.
Yeah.
I just find so much to learn from not just the storytelling alone of professional wrestling, as nerdy as that might sound.
No, it's a production and a half for sure.
Yeah.
I think when I started to get out of it was when Limp Bizkit started being the Undertaker.
Yeah, fair enough.
But
I had another question here. What sport do you miss the most?
playing or watching?
Watching.
Watching has to be hockey, man. Like we are right in the center of what should be the what awesome second round of the NHL playoffs, maybe the end of the first round.
Mhm.
I typically just follow like online to watch the games and kind of stream things here and there. But this time of year is usually when I buy Game Center and go all in. And me and the girls sit down. I teach them a little bit about hockey, and I definitely miss that. But I think in a couple of years, us as Sens fans are going to be rewarded with all this kind of colossal mess we're seeing. Should be a good draft pick.
I totally forgot that the playoffs would have been starting by now. Not only starting, but have been in almost in the second round. You're right.
It could
Jeepers
even be out by
creepers.
now. Game 7.
That's right. Oh my god.
Yeah.
For me, it's been a mixture. It depends on the week. During Easter weekend, I shed a tear because I couldn't watch the Masters. I love watching the Masters every year. We get together as a me and Justice, and we'll sit on the couch all Sunday and watch the Masters. UFC has been a big one for me, man. I just miss watching MMA so much. I'm super stoked that they're putting on a card next month in
Yeah.
Florida.
What's your take on the one that was going to be like a private island, fly all the fighters in? I was like, is this Mortal Kombat that's starting?
I
Like,
thought that was the coolest thing ever. It would, yeah. I wish that would have happened, but pushing it off a couple of weeks to go to Florida—that's just as cool, in my opinion.
yeah. Oh man. Yeah, no, you definitely the things you take for granted, right? I'm just waiting for the internet to cut out and then see what we all do.
I was thinking about that because the Hydro went out on us like the first week that we were sent on lockdown, and we thought, what would happen if we didn't have power? Not just the internet, but like power.
Yeah.
Then what would happen?
Without the internet, entertainment wise, I'd be all right because I've got about 15 years of awesome DVD collections right behind me, and I would
Hmm.
definitely tap into some of those.
Books, yeah.
Well, a book maybe. Um, but yeah, without power, that'd be an entirely different scenario, right? Might go to Gweck and borrow a prospector tent, set up out back with a wood stove.
You know, a lot of people running generators 24/7 if that would happen.
Yeah, no kidding. Well, at the price of gas, we can afford it.
Oh, dude, I love it.
It doesn't affect me. I'm not going anywhere. I have to take my truck out to the dump once a week just to make sure it's still running.
I know I don't use my truck for anything either. I've just been at home for 6 weeks.
Okay, well, let's wrap up this first one, and in the raise the bar fashion and spirit, what's you know what? I'm gonna challenge you to make one healthy meal a day and to journal it and tell me what you did and why you made that healthy meal. Our next
Ooh,
check-in. That's my challenge to you. One healthy meal a day with
excellent.
justification and rationale.
Okay, I like that. Let's do that. Let's just keep it at this challenge for now, and then I'll get something for you next week.
All right, sounds like a plan. Okay, bud. Well, raise the bars back, COVID edition.
Absolutely. And before we wrap up, I just wanted to kind of back up and dedicate this episode to Brian Bisson. We lost him this week. A counselor from Chiging, a very very well respected and loved community member, and he passed away on Monday, much too soon. And we're thinking about his family during this time. I know it can be hard going through loss of a community member, but let alone a family member during this time. And we just put our hearts out to them, the Bisson family.
Well said, Jess. Wishing him a safe spirit journey. He'll be missed for sure.
All right, man.
Okay, Neat Tice. Till next time.
Till next time, buddy. Cheers. Raise the bar, everybody. We'll see you next week.
Stay safe and wash your hands.